Years later, I realized they were struggling because of misalignment. So all of those issues were symptoms.
It starts from a small idea and it grows into something a little bit more.
My value is two things. It's being able to see the problem, see the opportunity, see the root cause of the problem, and then see what's not going to work.
Is identity just another word for culture, or is it something different?
Identity is something that is so alien today that companies skip that question.
It's a huge tool and a great tool. You're building awareness, you're making people more problem aware.
Before you choose culture, you need to choose identity, and that will tell you what you need.
Welcome to the podcast From Cold to Close. My name is Saeed and I'm the founder here at SRC Growth Partner, a growth company that helps professional services firms from around the world increase their revenue and profitability by acquiring new clients. My guest today is Majid Islam, co-founder of Alignment Cubed. After 2 decades leading biotech operations, including senior roles in BitBio and Horizon Discovery, Majid noticed a pattern. Great teams don't struggle because of talent or strategy, but because they are misaligned at the identity level. He now helps CEOs and leadership teams make sense of organizational complexity and end the firefighting, friction, and stagnation that slows companies down. Majid speaks widely across the Cambridge innovation ecosystem, and he's writing a book on identity alignment and how clarity of identity unlocks fast, sustainable execution. Majid, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Sai. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I think what you speak about struck me as really interesting, especially because it's something I've not really heard too much on. And I really like your approach in the way you approach alignment. And it's interesting to hear, but I guess the viewers and listeners don't know anything about this. So for the viewers and listeners out there who don't know who Majid Islam is, maybe you could share a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and what Alignment Cubed actually does.
Okay, yeah, pleasure. So my background is biochemical engineering, and the first company I joined was called Genzyme, and worked there on manufacturing in the ground for several years. And then within about 10 years, I found myself in a leadership position. And that's when things changed. I think, now being an entrepreneur, I can say entrepreneurial work starts off really difficult and over time gets smoother and smoother. Because being an employee is super easy. You come in, you're onboarded, you're trained. But when I found myself leading the facility that I had joined, and now the team that had recruited me were now working for me, it just became really complex. Things became difficult. It became a struggle. It took me a few years to get everything in place. Got to a point where the company was acquired by a large Japanese company, and the COO there started sending me to different manufacturing sites around the world. So I found myself in Canada, in Stamford, in Connecticut, in San Diego, in sites in Europe. And they were all different. They had all different products, technologies, different problems. But I managed to go in there, solve their problem, even though it wasn't my expertise at all, and then come out. And I was thinking, what is it? There was something that I was able to do, and I couldn't put my finger on it. Something that is across the board. It's completely sector agnostic. It didn't matter whether it was a technical problem or a marketing problem or a strategy problem. There was something there. Years later, I realized they were struggling because of misalignment. So all of those issues were symptoms. And I couldn't tell you that. If you asked me that at the time, I wouldn't be able to tell you people used to ask me, so what did you do? You went in there, they had problems. What did you do? And I said, well, I spoke to this person. I spoke to this person. I asked certain questions and then, connected some dots. And I think it was years later when I realized that actually what you have is symptoms of misalignment. And that can be misalignment in the leadership team. It can be misalignment between the leadership team and the middle management. It can be misalignment between the processes and systems you've got with the strategy. So there's misalignment in all different places, and it creates all the different symptoms that we see. So that's why with Alignment Cubed, we don't focus on any of those individual aspects. We tend to go in to a company, they have a specific problem, and we assess using a diagnostic tool whether that problem really is a root cause or whether it's a symptom of misalignment. And usually,
I love that.
I would say in our view, it's misalignment. And we say, look, you're looking at the wrong thing. You need to sort out this issue and these other issues will go away. And so that's what we do now. And I love it because it means I get to do the one bit of the work that I used to enjoy the most.
I think it's really interesting what you said there. I think you talk upon when you first started, when you first stumbled into actually solving these problems, right? And not knowing what you actually had done. And I think often business owners, entrepreneurs, that typically happens in the sense that it takes a while for you to really understand what you're actually doing that is providing value, right? And typically you have to sit down or you have to think about, it's not something that you sit down and go, oh, but that's what it is. It's an idea that forms over many, many years or a lot of your experience, right? And it reminds me often of Inception. It starts from a small idea and it grows into something a little bit more. And before you know it, you go, okay, well, now I've got a fully formed idea that I can actually go, okay, this actually works. In terms of then, what are the typical symptoms you see when you came across different organizations, and what are the solutions in terms of the alignment element of it, of what you mentioned?
Yeah. So before I talk about the symptom, I just want to pick up on something you said because I think it's so profound. 20 years I worked in operations, and again, from the ground to management to leading a facility to interim COO and then executive director. And I didn't know what my value was. If you had asked me 2 years ago, what's your value? What do you create? I wouldn't be able to tell you. Whereas now it's taken that long to be able to say my value is two things. It's being able to see the problem, see the opportunity, see the root cause of the problem, and then see what's not going to work. It's those two things and bringing those together from a systems thinking point of view and the emotional intelligence point of view. So that we're saying, look, this is not going to work from a systems point of view, or it might not work from a people point of view. You haven't got the right people to make this work. But when we work with these companies, they don't know what the real value is. So a lot of the companies, they have a technology. They have a product or a service or a technology. And that technology is creating revenue. So because it's generating revenue, nobody needs to actually define what the value is until you have a disruption in the market and you're no longer generating that revenue. And everyone's saying, what happened? Or a competitor comes along and challenges what you're doing. And then that's when you have to start thinking about what is the value that we're actually creating. And that's often a conversation I have with entrepreneurs or with founders is what value are you creating and how? And by value, I don't mean core values. I don't mean behavioral core values. I mean, what value does your product or your service actually create? Who does it create it for specifically? And how does it generate that value? Because if you're saying you're generating value, there must be a how. So why that's relevant to your question about symptoms, it's because they haven't defined that and aligned it to an organizational identity. Everyone on the leadership team has a different answer that they haven't spoken about. So that's what creates those symptoms. So what are the symptoms? So I would say it depends. There's two, if I was to say we divide all the organizations into two general categories, high control organizations and low control organizations. So high control organizations are those that are either process dependent, like your McDonald's or Aldi, Ryanair, those kind of organizations. Or you have your Unilever, they're policy driven, Unilever, GSK, AstraZeneca. These are all high control organizations. They need to be compliant. They need to ensure products are repeatable, sustainable. And then low control are organizations that are based on platforms. You have Airbnb, Uber, or small bespoke teams, bespoke services businesses. So these are low control organizations. In high control organizations, when they're misaligned, see three things: stagnation, relevance, and confusion. The staff are confused. They feel everything's stagnated. There's loads of work to do, but nothing is moving forward. It's like, why does it feel like we're going through sludge? And irrelevance. It's like, I'm doing all this work, but I don't know why I'm doing it. So, I worked in one of these high control organizations, and we used to go for a walk during lunchtime. And one of the commercial team wanted to meet me. So we met, we went for a walk. And he said, I just feel like everything's sort of meh, everything's there. And I was like, so what do you mean? Do you have not enough work to do? Because there's loads of work. But if I didn't come in, that work would just sit there. Nobody would notice. It's just irrelevant. So that's high control organizations. Low control organizations, agile organizations. The three symptoms we see there is firefighting, they're frantic, and they're frustrated. So this is what we see. They're constantly firefighting. They're frantic. They don't know which one to do next. They wake up in the morning. There's 100 things to do, and there's a lot of frustration and friction because you've got these team members they don't even realize they're misaligned. They don't realize that they're misaligned. Because if you ask them, what is this company about? They'll say, well, we've got this technology. It can cure leukemia. Great, we're all aligned on that, right? And it's like fantastic, and they're developing that technology. But where the misalignment comes is, so what is your identity as an organization? Who are you? What are you as an organization? And they'll be like, well, we're a startup. No, that's not the question. What are you? It's like, we're a leukemia company. That's still, you haven't answered the question. So identity is something that is so alien today that companies skip that question. And so those are the kinds of symptoms we start to see.
I think it's really interesting to hear that. I think it makes a lot of sense. And when you equate it to startup versus large multinational, right? Like if you look at it in any way, shape or form, like startup mentality in an organization will be very high growth rate, fast moving pace. Every single day is different, and you're firefighting a lot, and you're trying to fix problems and kind of building an airplane while you're flying it, right? Whereas a large multinational organization's been there for many years, many decades, and there is a system in place. Everyone is a cog in the machine, and often you can feel like you're not valued in that machine because you're just another number, right? And it's really interesting that you articulated it in the way you did in terms of high control versus low control. And you talk a lot about identity within your misalignment work. Talk to me about what kind of identities should organizations be looking at? What's the bigger picture? What does it tell us about how organizations work?
Well, so misalignment, something that more and more consultancies, coaches, thought leaders are thinking about. So traditionally it used to be, we're going to work on we're strategy consultants, or we're culture consultants, or we're marketing, branding, these kind of things. More thought leaders are pushing about how they all have to be coherent. And one of those is, who I really like, is an individual named Roger Martin. So he speaks a lot about the coherence. He talks about how a strategy isn't a plan, but the part that I really like is he talks about what makes a successful organization isn't how good your individual components are. You could have the best individual components. In fact, the best individual components, if they're misaligned, they're even more powerful at pulling apart. They're even more powerful at pulling it because your branding is pulling in one direction and your operations is pulling in a different direction. It's the same with diverse teams. If you bring in brilliant talent who are strong-minded, they have strong views, their experience, their expertise, they will actually create more misalignment than if you bring in followers who are not going to question anything. You have one leader, you just tell them what to do, they will do it. So what's happening is that what's changed is that you're getting more opportunity to recruit talent, and you're getting people who know themselves, expertise. There's YouTube now, there's the internet. Learning has accelerated. Information is widely available. So what you're having is people coming together and they are pulling apart. So we say, okay, how do you solve that? How do you solve that problem? Because even though people are recognizing misalignment and you can sort of intuitively feel it, the question we ask is how? How do you make all these components aligned? And I've tried to do that on various sites. And one way we tried to do it was by introducing management systems. So ISO 9001 is a standardized management system. There's 13485 for medical devices, 14001 for environment. I used to spend a lot of time, about 13 years of my career, going to different sites and implementing management systems because it was a standardized set of universal answers to how you do each stage of the business. And, a lot of people, they do an MBA and there'll be a lot of training on how to run a business. When you do that, the question that isn't being thought about is that MBA, are those ISO standards designed for one particular identity? That question is not being asked. And what I would say is that post-World War II, up until around the 1970s, all of these standardized systems are designed around the identity, which we now call efficient machine. So it's about processes, it's about a factory, it's about having standardization, it's about everyone has the role, you know your job title, you know your job description. All of these things people imagine are just business or just commercialization. And what it is that it's actually not. It's actually a specific identity, which is the efficient machine identity. So, and that's, if you think of Toyota, it's it's an archetype of that identity. You've got very, very clear the roles. You have the vertical hierarchies, and it was very clear. And most organizations, they aligned with this model since the past sort of 50 years. It's been that. So identity has not been a question that's been asked. I feel like I haven't given you a definition of what's or an explanation of what is identity. So let me try and do that. If you imagine there's a horse, and that horse has done some amazing things, and you say, oh, look at that thoroughbred. It's amazing. And it's done some amazing things. That's a part of its identity. But essentially, it's a horse. It's a horse, okay? But people aren't saying, is it a horse? Is it a cow? Is it a dog? They're saying, this animal is a fast sprinter. This animal is a great swimmer. And I'm saying, but what animal is it? And so what is it essentially? What animal is it fundamentally? And they're not saying it's a fish. They're just saying it's a fast swimmer. They're not saying it's a shark. So identity on an organizational level is as simple as that. It's about recognizing that just as you have, we're human beings, that's a dog, that's a shark, that's an elephant, that's a horse. There's something fundamental that is so simple, even a 5-year-old can see it. But if you don't call it out, then it becomes complex. So most people, they look at organizations at a higher altitude. They look at the branding. They look at the surface level, and they're not looking at an organization and saying, what is it fundamentally? What is it? And so this is the question we ask. We say, what is your organization? People find that really difficult because it's not something they've had to think about for past, half a century.
No, but I just jumping in, it's interesting you say that because you spoke about how talent coming in, like businesses and companies are now bringing in really good quality talent, right? But the talented people often go in their own direction, which splits the direction of the company in different silos. They almost operate in silos, right?
Yes.
The company operating in silos. So in terms of that identity and bringing everyone together, is that just culture or is it more? Talk to me about the difference between what a misalignment might be, what that is in bringing people together. Is identity just another word for culture, or is it something different?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and that's a question that we get a lot of the time. We say, is this just sounds like culture? One of the things you'll find is people saying, for example, when it comes to culture, in our company, we have a culture where we empower our people to make decisions themselves, to take risks, to experiment. You must be hearing this, right? This is something that you hear it on podcasts, you hear, it's all about. So they present this as a universal thing. And my question is that actually what you want? Do you want to empower your people? And if you say this, people say, what are you talking about? Do you live in the 1950s? Of course you want to empower the people. We say, well, actually, it depends. If you're building an efficient machine, the last thing you want to do is empower the people to take risks and to experiment. The whole identity of the organization of an efficient machine is about not taking risks. It's about compliance, standardization, follow the SOP, don't deviate. If you do deviate, you have to write a deviation report and explain why you deviated, what's the root cause. There's a whole series of things you have to do. So when people talk about, we've got to empower everyone, we've got to get people making their own decisions, that's a culture discussion. If you haven't chosen your identity first, you could be completely damaging the business because you're now empowering people to make decisions. They're going to take risks. You're trying to create a drug or a therapeutic. I mean, if you're talking about the space that I've been working in, enzyme therapy or cell and gene therapy, you need to be very careful because this is going to be injected directly into the bloodstream. So those people working in that environment, we don't want you to think. We don't want you to deviate. We don't want you to experiment. We want you to follow that process. So what we say is that before you choose culture, you need to choose identity, and that will tell you what you need. So, efficient machine is one of those core identities. So I'll tell you the 4 identities that we work with, and this is based on research from Oxford University's Business School did some work, and they found that when when organizations are aligned and coherent, and it can take years, one of four identities emerge. Okay. And, every successful organization fits into one of these four, one of these four aligned organizations, identities. So the first is the efficient machine, and it's the one that we're most familiar with. Your Toyotas and your McDonald's, high control. Then you've got your giant monster. That's the second identity. So giant monster isn't just a bigger version of efficient machine. Giant monster is high control, but the strategy is different. It's all about connectivity. It's all about finding synergies between multiple sites. So you look at the supply chain and you find efficiencies and synergies across the supply chain. That's how you win. You dominate the market. The goal of the giant monster is to dominate the market. The goal of the efficient machine is to produce products consistently, high volumes of product. So that's your control side. On your agile side and your low control side, you've got two identities. One is your elite team. So the elite team, the goal is solving complex projects fast. So you have a short-term complex project. It's bespoke. You need a group of experts. That's the identity where you want to empower your staff. You want to give them autonomy. You need to build high trust. You give them a mission and you say, the culture we need is break things, figure it out for yourself, go for it. It's go, go, go. Very different to your giant monster and efficient machine. The other one on the agile side is your visionary ecosystem. So this is still agile, but it's about long-term transformational change. So Apple went through a visionary ecosystem phase, Airbnb, Uber, Netflix. This is where you create a platform, you bring lots of people together, you have a very clear vision, but again, you empower the staff, you let them experiment, let them figure it out. So those are the four identities. So culture has to sit downstream of identity because you don't want the Google culture in your Toyota. And you don't want the experimental culture of an elite team in your giant monster. That's not what you want. And you don't want the bureaucracy and the compliance mindset in an elite team. You don't want to mix these. And this is where people get frustrated. You're used to work in an elite team. You get recruited into a giant monster and you're like, what's going on? Why is it so slow? Why is it so? Or for example, I've had a giant monster individual join an elite team and they're saying, where's the job description? Where's the roles? Where's the procedures? Where's the onboarding? It's like, none of that here. We're on a mission.
None of that structure here.
Yeah. So you can actually have a startup that is low control as an elite team, but it can still remain low control and get huge. So one example, because it becomes a visionary ecosystem. So this is the thing, is that the visionary ecosystem is still an agile, low control, low hierarchy organization at scale. And one of the ways they maintain that, Arm is a great example. So Arm is a company we've got them here in Cambridge. So they have about 6,000 employees, but they have 22,000 collaborators, partners, because they outsource their manufacturing. So if they bring their manufacturing in-house, they cannot remain a transformative,
agile,
visionary ecosystem, right? They have to become an efficient machine.
Sure.
So once you know your identity, not only can you make decisions about your culture, you can make decisions about your strategy. It depends. You've got to choose the identity first. And that's how you align everyone.
So fascinating. And that last example really makes it click. And you're absolutely right in that if you want to be that big giant monster, you go out and you bring manufacturing in-house. You build, like Amazon does, all these sites and you go, okay, logistics and everything like that. But otherwise, if you're keeping to that visionary element of things and you're keeping to that agile sense, then naturally and everything comes downstream from there. From understanding your identity, it allows you to then set the tone for the culture and set the tone for the team, set the tone for the organization. Makes a lot of sense.
It makes sense. Once you get it, it makes so much sense.
Exactly.
And it warms my heart as well, because I'm like, how can I get people to realize that, you've got two people debating. I'm listening to two people debating on, we need to focus. Our priority should be, efficiency. We need to focus on lean, cost saving. And you've got it's the same C-suite. And you've got one C-suite member, pushing really hard with data, with strong arguments that, 2026 has to be a focus on efficiency. And you've got another C-suite member saying 2026 has to be about innovation. We have to prioritize innovation. I'm like, well, it depends. If you're an if you're an efficient machine, then efficient machines actually thrive on the D element of R&D. It's not about research and development. It's about develop. You have something. If you have a product, it's working. Your focus needs to be efficiency, lean, getting that produced at scale, and then development, continuous improvement, making it better incrementally. If you're on the agile side, you've got to innovate. You've got to compromise. It's a trade-off. You've got to compromise on prioritizing efficiency, because if you do that, you're going to slow yourselves down. But you can't be inefficient. I'm not saying be efficient. I'm saying the priority has to be, the trade-off has to be agility and expertise and delivering over efficiency, lean, cost saving. It's that kind of nuanced decision. And we've had people who, once they see it, they say, I personally lean towards agility as an individual, but as an organization, now that I know we're trying to be an efficient machine, I'm happy to adapt. I'm happy. So it depersonalizes the whole process and stops being about my view versus your view, my background versus your background, my childhood versus your childhood, my lived experience. And this is one of the questions we ask when we're working with leaders. If we see there's a misalignment, we say, okay, let's talk about our lived experience in previous companies. And it becomes really clear that all the people that worked in giant monster organizations, the first thing they go to as soon as something goes wrong is policy. We need a new policy. We need more governance. We need more compliance. We need more management. We need more supervision. And the people who have worked in elite teams, their first thing to go to is talent. They want talent. They want to remove that. And it's all about the talent. So
it's really fascinating to hear it and the way you've articulated it. And it's once you understand it, once the penny drops 100%, it makes a lot of sense. I'd love to keep talking about this, but we have another section of the podcast called the Entrepreneur's Room that we need to jump into. So this section of the podcast is the Entrepreneur's Room. It's a series of questions we like to ask all of our guests to give our viewers and listeners an opportunity to understand how business owners and business leaders think and operate when running their business. So at this stage of the podcast, I always like to ask the same question, which is, how are you currently spending your days as a leader of the business?
So I spend a lot of time meeting people. That's one thing I do. So there's three of us at this stage. So I spend a lot of time networking, meeting people, because as you've noticed, once you get it, it makes sense. But there's not an awareness of this. It's not something that is new. We're creating a new market. So I believe at this stage that we're a category of one. I don't think that there's anyone else doing identity alignment so far, as far as we can see. So I spend time meeting people, doing talks around Cambridge, doing workshops. I'm also writing a book on this topic. So I'm hoping it's going to be the first book on identity alignment and how to make sense of organizational complexity and simplify it using these 4 identities. So I think spend a lot of time doing that. One other thing that I'm doing a lot at the moment is trying to transform this thinking into practical tools that people can use without us, so that we can help teams roll this out and make it really simple. So we've created this game that we play. I played it with my 11-year-old, and he gets it. So I think that's a really good signal for me. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. We're trying to build this up since we started around mid 2024, 2023. So we've not been around that long.
Love it. What are the most important metrics for you when running the business?
Okay, so you've got your obvious metrics, which I won't talk about because that's your standard. But because we're trying to build this awareness, we've got one of the things that we're trying to get a sense of and measure is how problem aware are people around misalignment? Do they recognize that they don't have an identity? Do they recognize this is a thing? Do they feel this problem? At the moment, our sense is that they don't. Most people don't actually recognize that misalignment is an issue. So that's one thing. So we want to keep building that. And that's why we're focusing primarily in Cambridge, because we're trying to get the ecosystem talking about this so that it becomes a thing, the point of conversation. So that's one, problem awareness, that, misalignment is actually a root cause of your firefighting and stagnation, not the other way around. The second thing that we measure is interest. So if are people signaling interest, we want to see, will they actually say, we want to know more? And this is, something that we're doing more very recently. We've started to capture that signal of interest. And then the third metric we've got, and this is something we've done, the first two are quite new, but the third one we've been doing from the start is we see how sustainable is the work that we do. Because, I've worked with, when I was an employee, when I was an exec in biotech, we brought in consultants. I think one of the consultants we brought in, we paid them something like £80,000. It was a huge amount of money, and nothing happened. Nothing happened with that work. Nothing changed. Okay. So what we measure is alignment creating a sustainable difference? Is it creating a shared language? Is it creating cohesion? Is it creating clarity? So we have a tool that we use to measure, diagnose, and assess the organization at the start of our work. And then what we like to do is go back after 6 months and measure it again to say, is this actually sustainable? We haven't been around long enough to be able to have some notable data on this. But from a testimonial point of view, we've got testimonials coming in saying, it's actually, this has changed. We've changed as an organization. We're talking differently. We're aligning, and it's actually making a difference. So that's been positive.
Love it. Love it.
So a little bit different, but that's the metrics.
Yeah,
because we're trying to generate, it's a bit of a movement that we're trying to create. It's a little bit different.
You're creating demand, aren't you? You're building awareness. You're making people more problem aware, and so it becomes a much more of an education-based marketing kind of play of generating awareness. Simple as that. Awareness of the problem, and once that people are problem aware, they're more likely to make the next step, which is interest in what you're doing, what you're able to solve for them. How are you currently? And you touched on this with Cambridge and networking and everything, but how are you currently growing the business? What are the specific business development activities you're currently doing to grow the business?
So one of them is obviously the networking and the talks and the workshops, getting out there. That's one. But the other thing that we're doing is we've been working on running a campaign. So there's a networking organization in Cambridge. It's a big one, and they've got 400 members. So we've actually partnered with them to run a diagnostic that they're going to send out to their members in January. So that's what we've been working on. We're actually currently, it's being piloted on Monday. And the pilot run is going to be sent out only to some 12 or 15 members, just to get some feedback and see how it goes. But the idea is it's something like 7 questions. And through those questions, you ascertain which of the 4 identities that they lean towards, or that they should be leaning towards based on their technology. And then we produce a report. So we're hoping through that, it's just another way of growth and building the awareness. Eventually, what we want to do is turn it into a platform. That's our long-term growth plan, is to turn identity alignment into a platform that can be used online, where people can come and interact with it and work out what their identity is. Because once you do that, it actually leads to so many other downstream considerations that, we don't have time to talk about. But the research on this is phenomenal. It goes into all sorts of areas, from process, systems, architecture, hierarchy, culture, core values. It goes into everything. There's like a different set of core values for efficient machine versus elite team, for example. So that's what we're doing. We're building that.
I think that's really interesting, and it turns on my marketing brain and what you said, the diagnostic element of it. Because in the marketing world, we call that something like that, like what we call a quiz funnel, right? So it helps them that you got 7 questions, like a quiz, that helps them identify the problem that they have, and you base it off, the outcome is 4 separate kind of like identities. And once you understand that, then you can understand how to solve the problems that they have. So it's really interesting that you said that, because it's a really great way to diagnose problems and also then offer the solution in the back end. So it makes a lot of sense that.
And it's like a bit of a personality test where you people go, oh, how did you know? Like, once we know which identity are, we say, so are you struggling more with stagnation rather than firefighting? They're like, yeah, how did you know? And it's because, once you know their identity, you can start predicting what's going to be the issue, which is really powerful.
Absolutely. It really is. It's a huge tool and a great tool. Majid, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. It's been a really fascinating conversation. I love to end every single conversation on this podcast with the same question, which is, if you had a magic wand you could wave to solve one of your business's problems, what would that be?
Would be getting having something that gets people to realize that misalignment is their root, is their root problem. If I had a magic wand, is getting people to become self-aware. So they're saying, no, we know what the problem is. That would be fantastic for us. Yeah. And in terms of other businesses, if I had a magic wand, it would be to say, I wish everyone had an identity. I wish every organization knew who they were, because then they'd be able to create better therapies, better solutions for the world. So, that's really what I would love.
It actually aligns with what therapists do. They help you realize self. And when you realize self, you have more power in how you actually move forward in the world. So actually self-awareness is the huge part, whether you're a person, an individual, or an organization. It's usually the first step to success. And so I love it. Love it. Majid, it's been an absolute pleasure having you. For all the viewers out there, listeners out there who may want to reach out to you, speak to you, where would they go? How would they find you?
So I am on LinkedIn. You can find me. But also we have a website, alignmentcubed.com. So if they go on there, there's loads of content. There's loads of case studies. There's a 5-minute presentation where I go into the 4 different identities and introduce it. It's one of those ones where every 15 seconds, the slide changes automatically and I can't control it. So it's intense, it's fast, but it's a really good introduction to it. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks, Saeed.
No worries at all. It's been a great conversation, and I know the viewers and listeners will have loved it. So thank you very much again for your time.